The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is the first cherry popping podcast that I've done, and this is the Living Lilith podcast. The reason I decided to call it that, well, I was inspired by my friend Shanna, who is not here with us today, but she said that's what I should call it. So I just kind of was like a lightning Midas like moment of awareness that that's what it is, because to me, Lilith is nature herself, which is a little bit of a different narrative than the others I think that we might be running across mostly on social media these days, which are very focused on Lilith being the succubus and so on. And I definitely want to talk about that more and more. And that's what this podcast is for. That's what my work is all about as well. But I want to thank you all for joining. First time cherry popping. My wonderful friend, Alexandra Kurowski, is here with us today, helping me pop the cherry. Thank you so much.
I could not be more pleased to be the cherry popper.
You are deserving.
Thank you, my dear.
I chose you to pop it.
It's an honor, indeed.
I'm really excited. I honestly could not think of somebody else to help usher in this new experience because Alex and I have been friends for a while on social media, and I have watched her growth. Excuse me, she has watched my growth for probably the past decade. I'm thinking about 10 years now. And her work is really, really special. I really have a lot of respect for Alex and what she does and how she does it. And so I just wanted to bring her on this celebratory first podcast where we can just talk about, first of all, nature, because that's what this podcast is about. Everybody that I bring here to this podcast is going to be somebody who wants to philosophize about it, just kind of hang out and talk about it. And most of the people will also be people who somehow center nature in their work. Everything from legal matters to witchcraft to, just the occult, to people who are gardeners. I mean, all across the gamut, in the as above, so below, in the as within, so without. So this is what I think Lilith is, and she's living. She's not this abstract idea that's just living in antiquity and that we worship, and turn into in this sort of theistic way. We turn her into this goddess to worship. She actually is living now within us and living outside of us. And so to learn to turn on those lights of awareness, to see how she hides in plain sight, even in today's postmodern society, I think is really important. To tether from the ancient to the modern is really what I'm personally interested in. And that's what inspired this podcast. So really excited. Yeah. So I'm Criselda Pacheco. Did I say my name? I don't know, but that's who I am anyways. Thanks again for being here. So anyway, let's get started. Let's talk about nature. What is nature and why nature?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Griselda, thank you so much for just opening up this conversation, because I think that it's missing in the greater context of how people speak about spirituality, how they speak about religion, how they are relating to themselves. And I think a lot of it has to do with that, is like, if you look around you at the wisdom that exists in all of the wildness of nature, of plants, of animals. And it's sort of instinctual connection to the ecosystem.
Mhm.
And, in humans, it's so different because we have these um, drives to kind of condition ourselves and drives to kind of we really suffer with our existence in a particular way. So I think that, in trying to solve that problem, we've interestingly gotten away from a lot of what could be helping us solve that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so nature, I really see as that sort of um, just that beautiful blossoming of what you don't have to work at. That is you. It's your individuation. It's the vessel that you're in and how that vessel seeks to express. And, the struggle, I think, in our society is we have all of these people on that journey together, but a lot of them are really lost on that journey, and the way that that impacts the process of that opening has really been felt far and wide in people.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things is we're going to always probably talk about on this podcast is how it hides in plain sight, right? And that's the thing. It's like when you realize it, you wonder why you didn't realize it before. Why do you think that we are so stuck in amnesia too?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think that, first of all, I think that we've been cut off from it. I mean, even in our physiological processes, the way we handle death and birth as humans, especially as Americans, I'm going to say it's probably, I'm sure there's other parts of the world. I know there's other parts of the world that honor it much more sacredly. And, but we really sterilize that process, and in doing so, it's like we kind of pop in, we're this natural being that pops into this like very sterilized world. And then you're like, what the fuck,
Right.
even for the first wisdom is, as you're an infant and you're trying to navigate, just existing. And it's just like, oh, this is whoa,
Well, I mean, it's been shamed, right? Nature has been
Absolutely.
shamed. And so this is we have inherited the fear of something so organic, right? So rooted even in antiquity, the wisdom. So we've been groomed to be afraid of wisdom, I guess, if we want to even
Mm,
kind of explain it that way, right? We follow the correlation of,
yeah,
like you said earlier, nature's wisdom, which is really the only perennial wisdom.
truly, truly. I mean, I think that because that's something you take with you through every expression of soul, and it's like I used to foster kittens a lot. And so I remember
Oh,
watching. I
wait,
did.
how did you give them back?
It was not easy, let me tell you. But usually when they start pooping everywhere, I'm like, all right, I'm ready.
Oh, okay. And the pee is also the
Oh
other
yeah,
thing. Oh
yeah.
my
I was like,
God,
all
that's a
right,
whole
this you
nother.
could be somebody else's problem now. But no, I
Oh,
mean, I love it. But one of the things uh I just it was just something that felt like such a profound process to me was when if I had a pregnant cat and she was giving birth, and she could be not even a year old, she could be, and she just knew exactly what to do. And to watch her go through this process of giving birth to kittens and taking care of the placenta and feeding them and hiding them and making sure they were safe, it was like it just she they would just click right into it. And it's like, God, humans cannot do that.
well, that's the interesting thing. I brought this up before regarding somebody, an author, or he's no longer with us. Too bad because I'm obsessed with him. His name is Wilhelm Reich.
Mm,
And you know who Wilhelm Reich is. He's actually, his work is very fundamental in my course, because I think that this man ran across this perennial wisdom in his search for like liberating the libido, right? Our libido, which has been very shamed.
yes.
Um, and he talks about the suppression of this very wisdom. He doesn't really use this language, but it's the same thing. He talks about the suppression of this wisdom is going to lead to fascism, and he predicted that back in the 40s. So I mean, and we're starting to see the effect of that cause now, right today, of what it's like when we forget that very wisdom that you're talking about.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of what we would call toxic spirituality now, but even existent through many different forms of religion throughout the years, even Buddhism, which I think, has ideas that I can even relate to. But to me, the feminine is so much about that nature that knows that you're safe. Like, she's a protector. So if you're trying to control a group of people, you want people to disconnect from that part of themselves that knows whether or not they're safe.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you have these sort of fascist ideas, and it's like, oh, we're just merging into oneness, you're one of us, and like, your emotions don't matter. If you feel weird about it, that's your problem.
Right.
And it's like, that whole idea is highly patriarchal, masculine, and fascist. It's major erasure of our natural wisdom.
Well, as I've always said, that's, fascism, another way to put it for me was always the limp dick epidemic. That's the hashtag. The hashtag for righteousness has gone wrong.
Yes.
It's just like you missed the mark, which is actually the etymology of the word sin in Hebrew. The Hebrew etymology of the word sin means missing the mark. So it's not, has nothing to do with shame, or, you know what I mean? Like some kind of moral shame, oh, you messed up and you should be ashamed for it. It's like, no, if you don't have a right angle somewhere when you're building a house, the house is not going to stand. It really is about true righteousness, not the false morality veiled over this word righteousness, if that makes sense. And that's where we've gone wrong, right? Is the shaming of that wisdom and shaming of that natural wisdom, like the cats have, that all the creatures have, it has led us astray into missing the mark.
Yeah. And I think that, a lot of that shame is really centered in on the feminine. So even the childbirth process, even speaking to, I have children. So even speaking to my own process, where like, giving birth got so messy, and people couldn't handle the fact that I was like yelling at them or in a bad mood. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, literally every pore of my body is exploding.
What do they expect you to be doing, like, for real?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, oh, you don't want me to touch you? What? Oh, why?
Oh my God. This reminds
like,
it's everything so polished. This reminds me of the day of something on Instagram I saw. So, I'm going to tell you, I have these guilty little pleasure TV shows that I watch. And one of them is Selling Sunset. Okay. Selling Sunset. And there's this woman who is pregnant, who's on that show, and they sell high dollar properties and houses over in Los Angeles. Okay. So they're the Hollywood people. And she's pregnant right now, and she's getting bigger and bigger. And she's, I think, about to bust soon. I really do. I think about maybe like a month away or less. And all these pictures, when she first got pregnant, she was very, very polished, very nice. And now, like, I could tell she's trying to still look polished, but she's looking like, she's constipated, and like she needs to go lay down. And I'm just like, look at all this performance of, like, this continued performance that the feminine is expected to keep up with. And everybody knows it's fake.
Yes.
But here we are still doing that. It's just exhausting.
And we celebrate women when they're pregnant, and we just abandon them after they have the baby. And, and that's just such a real thing that I went through, and that so many women I've seen go through.
Why do you think that is? Why do we celebrate them when they're pregnant, but then abandon them after?
Interestingly, I think it's because of this root issue, because I think people really crave to get back to their innocence. And so when you see someone pregnant, you're like, I don't know, there's this idea of like the life hasn't happened yet. There's like something so pure about it. And purity to me can have multiple meanings, but the most beautiful aspect of it is it's like it's untouched, it's unharmed at that point.
Right.
And, so I think that there's something about that moment that stimulates the subconscious that people are just driven to. I think a lot of people also attach and romanticize pregnancy a lot, which is something totally different. But, not my experience of it. I don't romanticize it one little bit, but I think that childbirth and pregnancy and the continuation and the idea of connecting this to women's worth has been really key in the oppression of women. So, so there's a lot of reasons I think
Right.
that it just kind of centers in there.
I love the point you made about how that it's because of the potential, right?
Yeah.
There's the potential there when you see a woman who's pregnant and it's still untouched, like it's still inside of this primordial space that is sacred, but once it enters, it becomes profaned. Do you know what
Yes.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like when it
Girl,
enter
now you're
once
just one of us. Like,
right.
oh, that's not special.
Right, exactly. Now you're just gonna eat and shit, and you're gonna do everything else that we, But meanwhile,
Yeah,
when you were inside the womb, you were this idea of perfection, this potential, and I think that that's what the feminine is, right? The darkness is full potential. There's a correlation there,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The
And I
primordial wisdom.
yeah. And and when coming back to the idea of nature, like, because when I look at people, as a psychic, as an intuitive, and as someone who's really supporting people in transmuting some heavy shit on the regular, it's like I always have my eyes locked in on that highest potential. When I look at someone, that's how I look at them. And it doesn't mean they're going to get there. Okay. I mean, and I think that
Right.
this is some of the thing, this is being human, right? It's like, you're not going to get there. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe some people have, where that's just a legend, who knows? But um, I think having your eye on it gets you closer, and it brings
Yes,
refinement to the journey,
I
and it
love
helps.
that.
Yeah, it helps, like, okay, this is where I'm getting distracted, this is where I'm getting off the path because I've lost that sight.
Mm.
Is
You
potential.
know, what you just said right now reminded me of something when I posted earlier that on my Facebook page that I was going to record my first podcast today. I wrote something out that I hadn't written in a while, and I was like, why haven't I been saying this? I used to say this all the time, that I talked about the potentiality of the human being, and that's ultimately what this podcast is going to be about, is how to reach the potential as a human being. Because when specifically about Lilith, right, we can talk about this in terms of other goddesses and other archetypes that people are constantly going on about. But I'm a humanist.
Yes.
I don't like to say I'm a goddess or a goddess expressed or something like that. To me, it just doesn't feel correct. It doesn't feel, you know what I mean? Like I want to be here 100%. I'm in my body, I'm in my flesh, I'm gross and I stink. and,
Yeah.
and, and I'm a
I'm
human.
so with you. I
Yeah.
love that shit. I love it. And that's what it's like, I always felt like, in my spiritual journey, especially when I first started teaching and people were really looking to me like, oh, you're like this person. It's this sort of pedestallation process that people kind of go through. Not everybody, but
Right.
I was like, oh, I don't want to be perfect. Like, I really hate that idea, actually.
And what is that anyway, though? For real?
Yeah,
What is it? Like
it's not real.
no,
It's
it's not.
it's an imagination. It's a, it's and perfection is rooted in shame. So it's like the
Right.
idea, that we could be perfect means that we have shame about our just beingness,
Right.
and so when people would catch me, cursing after class, or like, just kind of whatever, I don't know, talking shit at the bus stop, or like, going to the bar, they're like, oh, like, I'm like, yeah, I do shit. I am a person with a
And I was
life.
like, oh my God. Oh my God. When I was a
Yeah,
stripper, I
yeah.
loved it when I was a stripper because, everybody, oh, she's a goddess. She's a goddess. And whoever's over here, a goddess. And she's like flipping her hair on the right lights and her butt and everything. And then all of a sudden she's like sweaty and then she's like, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go to the back to go freshen up. And then we go to the back and I see that same goddess on the corner farting.
She was holding that in for a while.
She was like, oh my God.
Thank God.
I
Sweet
mean,
little-
she'd go to the stall, and I'm like next to her in the stalls, everywhere, just kind of like, and then she go back out and bend over again. I was like, I know the secret.
Yes.
We are human.
Yes, absolutely. And it's like, I think that people seek to objectify. I mean, I guess that's the thing. The idea of the goddess is really an objectification.
It is.
It's an archetype. It's a slim little part of existence,
Right.
and very one-dimensional. And I mean, I love the idea of the goddess, and I work with it and connect with
Right.
it, but it's not, I don't live there.
Right. I mean, and the thing is to use the words, or the word that you used a little while ago, which is sterile. It sterilizes the feminine. The feminine is anything but sterile,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
She's
know.
messy and
And
real.
perfection is nature, isn't it? That the laws of nature are already perfection, and there's a lot of blood and poop and awful brutality in nature. So I mean, to sterilize her or try to sterilize her is to take away the exact thing that makes her divine as hell and incredible and beyond our comprehension, truly.
Totally. And I think that sterilization process also kind of forces us into extremes. If like
Mhm.
we're in extreme perfection mode or performance mode, then
Mhm.
I think the backside of that, can show up a lot of different ways. But, whether it's your behavior towards others or, your health, or I mean, then there's a breakdown that's occurring somewhere.
Right.
And, when we actually embrace our nature, then all of that is much closer to the center. I mean, you look at, how leaves grow on a branch, like how elegant and beautiful that is,
Right.
and that's, I think, if we actually like embrace our nature and remove shame from our growth process and really, express what's wanting to express through us freely without judgment, then we can get closer to that idea.
Right. Right. It's what you talked about earlier, when we talked about individuation. Can you talk about that a little bit for people who don't understand where that's coming from? It's Carl Jung's term about, integrating, right? The opposites. But what 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 is that? What does that mean, individuation?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Like,
mean,
what does it look like?
right, totally. So, I mean, I think that this is sort of the world that we're going in now, right? Where it's things are, I think this is maybe to speak a little bit to the switch in ages, like moving into Aquarian age out of Piscean thinking. Piscean's all about like oneness, and martyrdom and just sacrificing for the whole. And then Aquarius is much more like, we could do better than that.
Right.
It's like, but it's really embracing the individual. It's here we are. I always view spirit as it sort of dips in, it kind of dips into the body. And so there's this sense of oneness and connectedness,
Right.
like I feel connected to you. I feel a sense of oneness with you, but I know you and I are totally different people.
Right.
So there's that there's the things that run through us all that connect us.
Mhm.
Life force, to me, the mother is the most universal sort of idea. Like we all come from one. It's with us all.
Right.
But individuation is our own personal struggles, our own personal expressions, um, really shaped by um, our hopes and fears in an interesting way. Like I think the things that drive us, the things that really push us forward. And you talked about libido and at some point, I feel like it's also very much connected to sexuality and libido. Like the way that we express ourselves, are the same things that might like just really kind of like just turn us on to living. And, it's that sort of idea of sexuality in terms of your beingness, your connection with your body, what it is that you're here to do, here to create. And then the flip side of that being, the part of yourself that is seeking to be understood but isn't yet. And how is that
Mm.
expressing and making noise in your life and sculpting your experience in a way?
Right. It's interesting too. It was making me think of when you bring up the libidinal energy. Remember, I think I posted something, yeah, yesterday. And the reason I posted this on my social media was because we were having a conversation about Madonna
Mm,
and how she just recently announced that she's going to go on tour, and she's like 64 years old, and everybody's like, "What the hell?" It's like, and she's showing her ass and all of that. And there was a conversation that started on my page about it, and there were some people really, actually, women who were really upset about it and repulsed and talking about how she doesn't need to be flashing all of that and his sexuality. And another male mentioned about how, she's, oh, the reason why it's gross and it went away with her. He didn't use that word, so I don't want to say that he used the word gross, but
mhm.
he pretty much implied it. And that it's gross because Madonna's, used sex her whole life and she's still using it. And that's what makes it different the Rolling Stones not being called out for wanting to continue to party, you know,
Right.
or Tori Amos or something like that, for
Right.
instance. And I feel like when people say things like that, they don't understand what sex is, and most people do not understand what sex is. They
Yes.
think it's a good old in and out,
Yeah.
and there you go, and that's all it is.
Yeah.
And it's a whole world. It's actually the reason. It's what spurs our will, right, and our creative force. It is the libidinal energy, that, to bring it back to the libido conversation.
Yeah.
Is very misunderstood, and that's what's been shamed.
Absolutely. I think it's actually really connected to our will to live in a basic way. It's like what makes us excited about life and what makes us and it's interesting to me that the correlation between Madonna and Tori Amos, because I see Tori's incredibly sexual too.
I think so
No,
too. Yeah.
and it's like in a different way. And
Yeah.
that's insinuation. They do it differently.
Right.
And what the fuck, like rock, like I hope I'm as awesome as Madonna and her when I'm 65, like whatever,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and
Right.
that
I
my
know,
version
seriously.
version's gonna
Honestly.
be different. Your version's gonna be different, but it's gonna be awesome.
Right. I know. You know, I'm
Yeah.
just kind of like, whenever people are annoyed by that, it makes me like want to show my butthole, you know, when I'm 75.
You give hope for us all, Griselda.
Well, I'm trying to help liberate. And if showing my butthole at 75 will like make somebody spaz out and finally like arrive on the other side of this, I'll be like, yeah, here's my butthole. Liberate yourself.
You made butthole liberation possible. I'm so like
I'm gonna
honored to
make chocolates out of my butthole and sell those too.
please do.
Make them monetize that. Why not? Why
Yeah.
not, girl?
Yeah.
You know, and I want to bring back this conversation to Lilith too, and nature and Madonna, and how Madonna's a very Lilith figure, you know, speaking of Lilith and so on, for sure. I like to touch a little bit on the Lilith and conversation, and then we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about Lilith in the future and in this dystopian society, and talk about more about what you do and some other fun questions. But Lilith, yeah, I really feel like a lot of people, I'm gonna say everybody, has been missing the mark when it comes to who Lilith is. And as somebody who was a sex worker for 20 years, who's a stripper, I did some dominatrix work too. I was a sugar baby, and so on. I came to see Lilith as nature herself, because when I see women sort of positioning themselves on purpose on Instagram and TikTok or wherever else as the succubus Lilith, and they're doing the succubus stuff, and oh yeah, I'm the demoness, you know, Lilith and all of that. I'm just kind of like, girl, almost like you're kind of you're playing into the story that already exists about her. So in that way, to me, they become controlled opposition. They're not at the point of transcendence. And to me, Lilith is a third point. She's not what the Abrahamic religion has said that she is. There's no real rebellion in my eyes, you know, positioning yourself as in that way, or making Lilith what everyone says she's always been. I don't know. What do you think about that in terms of who Lilith is?
To me, I've experienced, you know, it's interesting. The first time I really encountered it was in a reading, and I was reading someone, and then the energy would come forth a few different times, and it always felt like she was on the periphery, you know, and I could feel her and see her in this sort of wild, like bramble, you know,
Right.
and then in the center, you know, I was seeing in the first vision, I remember this, I was seeing sort of an Adam and Eve situation, right? I'm trying
Uh-huh.
to remember the details, but it was like, oh, there's all this light. I'm like, oh, we're gonna do this. And then I could just feel this like movement in the shadows of like, and this is to me what Lilith speaks to, is this idea of like knowing your safety and knowing when something's wrong, protecting yourself. And it's like I could feel that tremble almost. It was like I don't know if this is answering your question, but this is just
It is.
okay. Yeah. So to me, it was this sort of like this life-giving push to like protect itself and to maintain and to grow. And that was sort of the tension that was like pushing this scene in the center. These
Right.
people who were like seeking the ivory tower. This was this sort of there was the energy surrounding this. It was this tension surrounding this, like, don't abandon me. And and there's you see so many examples throughout history of people splitting the goddess in half. Here's the lovely wife and mother, and then here's the destroyer. So it's like, it felt to me like that moment where, we split her, and it doesn't need to be that way. Like
Right.
to me, Lilith is that sort of like, it's that pure wildness, and that pure and when I say wildness, I mean nature. I don't mean just like chaotic.
Right.
But it could be chaotic, but it doesn't
Right.
have, but as an embodiment, like she just feels like life, the way that it's really hard to describe. It's like this, it's an electricity that I feel
Right.
around
Yeah.
protection.
Well, it is protection, because I feel like, I think that really makes a lot of sense that you would sense her that way, because to me, if she represents the primordial truth, like of all the raw materials, right? And we think about alchemical experience, or the talk about alchemy. I think she represents, for the feminine, the most natural, the most original, and the most primordial, the most raw truth,
Yeah.
the most fundamental, and everything else that has come out of that space always adapts itself to the new culture, to the new epoch, to the new moral laws, or you know what I mean, as they change and morph and all that. But she remains the same throughout it all. And so to me, this is what I realized too, is that, well, the split in the feminine, the Madonna whore. As a sex worker, I was definitely the one on the outside. And I saw this war happening in the feminine principle, not in the masculine, between Lilith and Eve, the Madonna whore. And Eve to me is the feminine of culture, and Lilith's the feminine of nature. And so, Eve adapts as she needs to adapt to survive in culture. And in doing that, she gives up a lot of her own power, right? In that way. So it makes sense that she was the protective force, saying, don't abandon me, because this is what she's been used to since forever, right? Thousands and forever and ever and ever and ever.
Yeah. And that's the real wisdom in that is not out of desperation. It's not, like, she's just like, don't fuck up your life. Don't be a shit.
That's it. It's
like,
just
that's what I mean when I say don't abandon me. It's like,
Yes.
you're making a mistake, dude. Like,
Right.
and it's that wisdom that, like, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere, but if you don't engage with me, you're gonna get the lessons the hard way.
Yes, that's it. I mean, because then we're abandoning fundamental wisdom.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly how I see her. And it really makes me feel just frustrated when I see all the younger generations too, especially just continuing this, like, I'm embodying this succubus Lilith thing, and they don't realize that they are actually controlled opposition, right? In a lot of ways, reinforcing that false idea of her power and who she is. So, okay, well, we're going to take a little break, and then come right back and finish up with my wonderful friend Alex, and just keep on philosophizing.
Woo. Thank you.
Okay, we are back for more philosophizing and blasphemizing. So we want to talk about something that I think is, is really, I think, very important. And this is what I do in my course too, is tethering the ancient to the modern, and why it's important to not abandon what's in the past. I think that happens a lot. I think a lot of people, what I have witnessed, and tell me if you have too, is people thinking, oh, we're not living in that time anymore. Oh, that's this way over there. So it becomes this fantastical, weird idea that is no longer in existence. I'd like to kind of talk about dismantling that and see, is that true or not? And then how does Lilith live today? What does all this look like in today's postmodern dystopian, because it's going to become more of a dystopian reality, right? So how can we, what does all that look like today?
Yeah. And I think it's an important point because, as you mentioned, Lilith being that sort of perennial wisdom, and every time is going to have shit that does not need to move forward. We know. And, but looking back in human existence, and when there was a deeper connection to the earth, and there was a more sort of intuitive sense of what was going on, that, there's a deep level of attunement within the self and the other, that is just innate. And that is a wisdom that ought to be carried forward. Absolutely. And I think that a lot of our modern society has to do with overcoming nature or mastering nature, or I remember, I don't know if anybody has ever taken the drive out to Key West, but the idea of just like this bridge driving over the ocean, and like I remember this crazy thunderstorm, and I'm like, I'm gonna die, and I'm like, this is, what the fuck are people doing? Like, I'm on this little bridge in the middle of the ocean going to Key West for some God knows reason. Anyway, but the idea of like, we can conquer this, we can do this, and she reminds us regularly, like, I'm in charge, guys. Like I can fuck your shit up if I want to.
I know. It's so funny. When I used to live in San Francisco, and I was like, we were looking over at the bay once, and I was super loaded. I had smoked a bunch of kind bud, and I was just looking out at that water, and I thought to myself, I was like, man, if that water wanted to, it would just rise up and take us all. But look at it. It's nice. It's being nice right now. Thank you for being nice.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think it all comes down to like harmony and like our sort of sense of harmony with it. Like, of course, we're going to grow and evolve as people and humans and as a culture. And now, we're seeing so many leaps and bounds in terms of, liberating people who have been oppressed for so long. And, we have all this technology now, and we have just so much more is available to so many more people. And there's a lot of kinks to be worked out, no doubt, and I think that that's when you're in a process of growth and rebirth, breakdown and breakthrough, Lilith is that thread that carries you through. And that is the wisdom that's going to be like, this is how you get through it. Right. I think that anyone who, I'm a highly Uranian individual, like chaos has ruled my life in ways I hate to admit, but that was the one thing, is like surrendering, be like, all right, I don't know, but something in me does, and I'm just going to let that.
Right. Well, that brings up something else, is a difference between intuition and discernment. Yes. Because we can have an intuitive hit about something. Yeah. But we don't know how to discern what it is, then we might miss the mark some more. We might project absolutely in our assumptions about what it is. And so the discernment is really the more masterful way of how to respond to your intuitive nature, right?
Yeah. Because I've taught intuitive development and psychic development for years, for over a decade at this point. And when you're new at it, you project like hell. You project everything, not everything, but it's you project a lot. And there's a deeper place you have to get to kind of connect in with that more discerning nature. And that is a sense of truth. And it's that part of you that might question what you're seeing and know, like, you feel it. Right. But it's an experiential process to get there. Like, you have to touch that feeling to know it. And until you get there, you're going to do all the other things. But it's that process of sort of quieting out all the noise of what's happening. Right. And getting to this deeper level. And we're in a time now. So, just looking at now and what everyone is going through, so much is happening in the world, like where to even begin. Okay.
Mhm.
And I think that this is the time because, things are breaking down, things are changing, systems are breaking. This is a time we have to bring that wisdom to the surface. And it's not all like, oh, I have this, I did a bunch of shrooms and now I have this grand idea of how the world should be, and I'm going to just fucking do it. Like, I'm not talking about being delusional.
Oh my
But
God.
like, I do think that, I do think that I think that that brings people to a place of, oh, like this is possible, but I think that what people are most uncomfortable with is not actually knowing where you're going
Right.
and finding the way as you go. And there's a certain value to that in the creative process, that is highly undervalued and feared because
Mhm.
of our own shame and our own senses of what failure is. Like, I don't even think failure is a thing, but like, it's just,
Right.
it's literally like, if you're breaking ground for the first time, if you're doing something nobody's ever done before, you really have to let yourself be led. You
That's
have to
it.
trust.
Well, when I first fell into a very powerful dark night of the soul, I mean, I've had a few. There was one in my 20s and then one before I turned 40, and or right at 40, I think. I don't know, something right before. Anyway, I always said it was Lilith meeting me at the gates, and when she's meeting me at the gates of my own hell, which is my own unconscious, right? Basically, all the things that have been there the whole time, and showing me around. Showing me around myself, the things that I have hidden from myself, either willfully or not in a naive way, both. Um, I think this is true for all of us. And the thing I wanted to bring this back around to the modern stuff and Lilith and perennial wisdom, because I've been collecting a lot of information from my course and researching about AI, and that is a really powerful way to look at. I think AI is expressing the collective unconscious, right? And I've been reading a lot about how scientists or different people in technology are worried that AI is going to be a psychopath eventually, because I mean, and again, what does that mean about us? It's going to be what we birthed.
Right.
It is our coming out of our minds, so that's expressing to us as in a mirror, isn't it, that we do not know ourselves. And
Yeah.
that way, if we create something else that has no sense of a true moral compass, not this false morality, but the morality that comes from a deeper earth natural wisdom from Lilith.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason why it's, hi everybody, it's important to look again at this ancient wisdom, at the only wisdom there is and always has been. Let's go back to basics, because if not, we're going to create, Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to come here and the Terminator is going to, kill us all, everybody. So it's like, maybe that was actually a true story. But I'm just saying, we are entering that time, and it's probably a good idea to tap into this deep, ancient, perennial wisdom that is unchangeable and
Yeah.
uncompromising, no matter what times we are living in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think because there's, like, AI is interesting. I mean, to me, the whole process has been fascinating. I've been, kind of looking at all the different opinions and stuff like that. And and the idea of it being a sociopath is interesting, because to me, that's like pure creation, pure go, 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 do the thing, do the thing,
Right.
do the thing. And then you
Right.
like block out everything else that exists,
Yeah. Right. Right.
and there's no capacity to receive, and there's no compassion, and that's like, and that's something that I think organic, and I mean, compassion is maybe not necessarily innate to things that are not human, um but this idea of receiving and allowing for something to happen, being part of the growth process,
Right.
it's just I mean, like, just look at how plants grow, and and how they have
Right.
to receive
I
so
mean, it's
much
exciting.
to make it happen. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
It's exciting on one hand, and it's exciting on one hand until one day your sex doll's trying to murder you at 3 in the morning.
Exactly. And that's
It's
like,
like, oh
no,
no.
sorry.
made a bunch of Lorena Bobbits, everywhere. Bobbit robot. There's some kind of alliteration there for sure.
Yeah.
The
Can
Bobbit
we
robot.
have that one? That sounds fun.
Shit. Okay, so I wanted to move on from that and talk about. I really want to get to you and your work and your personal story. Let's do that. I want to know. Do you
Hmm.
remember how old you were, or about the time in your life where you were realizing what it is that you really comprehend right now? And that's this deep esoteric wisdom. Do you remember something that occurred in your life when you were little or not little? What was
Yeah.
that story?
Oh God. I mean, I think that when I was little, I had a lot of experiences that I didn't understand. And I just thought everybody was like, oh, you have a wild imagination, But I remember being a young kid and instantly knowing that I was different. I didn't fit in. And like, I didn't know how to, and I didn't even really want to. And I was just kind of like, what the fuck? Like, I just felt like that feeling of being plopped on earth. And I'm like, what is going on here? So,
Right.
I mean, I just remember that from very young, trying to make friends and all this, which I did. I mean, I'm friendly, I'm good at getting along with people, but I never felt like satisfied in it, I guess was the thing. Meanwhile, my imagination, my vision was so strong. So oftentimes I would have dreams, right? And I would wake up and the dream would be happening in my room, and I would be telling my mom, or whoever was there, like, what's happening in the room. And, so there was always this like bleed over, like
Right.
that the spirit realm or the astral realm, or however you want to term it, it was very alive in my vision from the moment I was born.
It was normal to you. It
It
was
was very
not,
normal. And
yeah,
that's
very
just like,
normal.
okay, yeah, like I'm going to walk through the house and I'm seeing these little monsters, and I'm seeing these little things scamper up the walls, and,
Oh my
and I'm
God.
seeing color over
What did
here.
you
And
see? What did you see on the walls? Because I saw things on the walls.
yeah, I always used to see, I mean, it's hard to describe, just little shadows scampering. And then there was like
Ah,
I remember a big bug-eyed monster in
no
my
way.
old
Oh,
house in Tennessee. Yeah. And I would just see it all the time. And it was like, whatever, okay, like it's next to the telephone. Like I just
I mean,
didn't
it was,
really,
yeah.
I wasn't scared. it was just there, and, looking back now, I think they were maybe land beings, or, something of that nature. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was just, it was all there. So it was
Mhm.
like how you imagine in your mind's eye, if your mind's eye, like I lived in virtual reality, it was like, that's just what my world was like. And so, I mean, that was true for a long time. My teenage years, I definitely just did a lot of drugs, and that was sort of my way of engaging with it, and really resisting at the time, so actually in high school, this is pivotal, because at the time my mom, she went full on new age. Okay. When I was in high school. And this was interesting because she and I had discussions where um she felt like she had found I mean, listen, I gained so much wisdom and divine knowledge from my mother and her journey at that time.
Mhm.
My connection to spirits at that time was incredibly profound. My connection with what we would know as the angelic realm was incredibly profound. Moments where my life was saved, moments where, a friend's life would be saved, because I got into
Wow.
some shit.
Yeah.
I got into
Yeah.
some shit, and
Yeah.
I should not be here. I'll
You
put it
fucked
that way.
around and found out.
I fucked around and I found out. Okay.
Right. That's the only way
And
to do it, though, really. I mean, that's really
some of
that's
us
the
are
way.
on that little chaos path of like,
Right.
all right, here we go.
Yeah.
But there was always something
Mhm.
pulling me out, and keeping me going. And there was some point in my 20s where I'm like, I couldn't die if I wanted to. I am stuck here, and and I would find every suicidal maniac in the world, and I, would somehow land in their path and at a critical moment and save their life and get them to change. And
Right.
I don't, I'm not like saying this in like an ego way. Like I hated it, to be honest with you. So there's
Well,
no ego,
there's a burden. There's a burden to it.
very
There is a
burdensome.
burden, right? And you
Yeah.
feel you're the outsider all the time. It feels like looking in, and you're wondering if anybody can see you. You can see them, but they can't see you, and you can measure that by how much they project onto you. You can see what it is that you are, your role for them and what you're serving for them, rather than them seeing you as your holistic self.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And your own sovereign right. But you were there as a screen for their projection. And I feel like that happens a lot, right? When we are really awake, and I hate to use that term awake. I don't know what it is I'm trying to say here, but more self-aware, maybe, have a deeper self-knowledge, and it's more sincere. You're not trying to do all that to be better than anyone, but that's just the way that you are. And you see that
Yeah.
not the way our society has been groomed to be. And a lot of people are not doing that. So then you have to bear the brunt of it.
Yeah. It is. It's very burdensome. And I would say that this, like, it didn't matter how aware I was. I want to clarify that. You mentioned self-awareness. I find myself much more self-aware. It definitely still happens. But I think I'm also more clear about what I express and put out about
Right.
myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm bringing a lot more definition to my being these days, where before I was just kind of like, in the soup, and then I would like
Yeah.
do a lot of drugs, or I would like just, or if I was with a guy, like, I, chase sex a lot in terms of like just feeling grounded and feeling in my body. And then it was like always, oh, I want to keep this person. So it was like, there was a part of me that was never really me then, even though that stuff was happening,
Right. Right.
a heavy dissociation there, which I think is a common sort
Uh-huh.
of, what do you
An
call,
arc, like
like a
is it
common arc for those of us who
right?
experience this kind of pathway. But it also is highly informative.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it was super dissociative, not really good for me, but it was very informative around sort of the shadows that people work through and hold. And the moments you witness are like, you can't learn this shit in a book,
No, that you can't. This is what I'm saying. That when I left San Antonio a long time ago in my 20s, I remember talking to my friend Jennifer, who I'm going to send this to her, my childhood friend. And I told her, she's like, what are you going to, basically, like, what are you going to do out there? Where are you going to go do? I was like, I'm going to go collect data. That's what I told her. I'm going to go collect information, and then I'll know what to do with it on the other side. And it sounds to me, I mean, we have to be initiated by chaos. I think those of us who are on this path sincerely, not
Yeah.
this. And there's a whole bunch of Instagram witches and a bunch of social media priestesses and all of these and this and that. And it's fine to learn things by reading books. I think that those are supplemental, though. Those are not
Sure.
primary. Yeah, those are not
Important to
primary.
educate yourself as you're going. I mean, listen, I educated myself. I was like, okay, so this is what happened when my mother died. My psychic sight became so pronounced during that time. And at that point, I was like, what the fuck is going on? Because this is something
Wow.
different. Now
Yeah.
this is me just all like, oh, la la la, life is so crazy. Like,
Wow.
this is something different. I was also doing health coaching at the time. And I was having these experiences of people's organs talking to me and like telling me what they needed. And then I would start to see all those little creatures and critters that were running up the walls when I was a child. I started to see them in people, and they started to
Oh,
look at me and they started to challenge me. I know this sounds
oh,
crazy, right? But like
that's badass.
and then I was like, okay, this is a thing.
Yeah, okay. It's like, all right, well then
And
let me go ahead and stop and look at this one-eyed bulging motherfucker who's trying to tell me something. Clearly.
yeah. So then it was seeking out, and listen, I mean, the internet was the Wild West. I mean, it still is, but it was definitely the Wild West then. And in books on spirituality, magic, all of that, and you're getting other people's initiations. And
Right.
that's something that when you are educating yourself on this, it's important to do.
And that's the issue. Yeah.
Yes, but recognize that that is someone else's journey, not yours. So
Right.
this is where this idea of like, take what works and leave the rest is really, really key in discernment, and really, really key in developing your own refinement on your own path. whatever that initiation looks like for you. So it's sort of like you're always going to hear little things, or get some practices or some tools that are like, oh my God, this is helping me so much. Great. That's
Right.
going to evolve. That's going to change. And you're
Right.
going to do differently. But that was at that period, that was the period in which I started to do psychic work professionally. And
Ah.
all I can say is when I actually engaged with it and took it seriously, oh my God, it brought so much peace to my life in a lot of ways.
It just needed to be integrated in a way
Just
that was not hiding, but now out,
yes,
you
yes,
know.
yeah.
And I understand what you mean about finally just embracing. I mean, my chart, I tell people I was born to be hated. It's in my astrological chart. I was born to be hated. I have this T square of Mars and Pluto on my sun sign,
Mm,
Cancer. And then
mm.
my Lilith is rising in my ascendant, and she's in direct opposition to Saturn. And she's in Jupiter, she's in Sagittarius. But there's all kinds of different things that just make me, everything's my fault when I walk into a room. It's just my fault,
Right.
right away. So I was like, oh, well, fuck it. I'm just going to be the cunt cape superhero, which is why I have a cape that says cunt. And I have a little wooden devil, Larry the devil. I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to embrace it,
Yeah.
because all of a sudden it liberates something, and you're going towards your individuation, your integration, right? And there's a salvation in doing all of that.
Yeah.
It
Like I
grows.
took all that chaos that was just happening in my life and I directed it towards what needed to be healed in a person.
Yes.
And it would do the same thing, but it was doing it where it was
Mhm.
supposed to do it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
not,
yeah.
just fucking up my life.
Well,
So
like life itself initiated you, the direct experience of the chaos and having to figure that out and getting burned by the flame and all of it. I think it's the highest ways to learn in our direct experience, and that the books are supplemental, but it's our direct experience. So that I always tell my students and my clients, I always tell them, I'm not trying to get you to believe in yourself. I'm trying
right.
to get you to believe yourself.
Yes.
How do you
Yes.
get to believe yourself? Um,
Yes.
Okay, yeah. And I wanted to, before we go, another thing talking about um God, there's so much we can talk about. We talked about human, like what is human nature, for instance? Like, do we have a human nature? And then also like what is the problem? Why is it important to bring all this forth now? So like if we can talk about and integrate those two things about our human nature. Do we have a human nature? Is there such thing as human nature? And is why is it important to do this work?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think so important to bring this work forward into your day to day and just sort of like doing the work to kind of connect in. I mean, to me, it's like Jung's idea of shadow work, where you're sort of working with the conscious mind and you're working with the subconscious mind. And Lilith is active in the subconscious, but
Mhm.
we can bring her into the conscious. Sorry, my cat's knocking the laptop there. We
Oh,
can bring her
speaking of
into
Lilith, right? Your cat's like all excited.
she is my little mama. So so Lilith is like active in the subconscious. And similar to my own journey, it's going to just make a mess until we're like, oh, you're here, like what do you want to do?
Right.
So it's sort of bringing in that sort of consciousness. You see these two different streams of thought that have kind of shaped psychology in the 20th century, whereas you have the Freudian psychology is very rooted in that, like that conditioning.
Yes.
We're going to make you nicey. This is how you behave.
Right.
Be a good little, and then, well, Freudian psychology is super problematic. And then Jungian psychology was much more the other end of the spectrum,
Right.
where
Right.
like you just need to be as wild as possible, like
Right.
dive right into that subconscious. I do think that there's something to be said for both. And this
Right.
is because I teach tarot, and this is like, where do you kind of take that subconscious drive and you bring it into a sense of refinement? Like, I don't like the idea of conditioning, but I do like the idea of refinement, where
Right.
it's like, okay, I've got this thing that could be something really cool if I could just, get it together. And so I think this idea of embracing your messy sort of primordial side, taking what's good and then like developing it, and applying that process to really every part of your life,
Right.
how you relate to others, how you are, connecting in with the world, the earth, how are you maintaining and solving the world's problems? How are you a part of the solution? Like, we have to bring that creativity into, finding solutions for the world's problems, which are vast and many. And,
Right.
we don't have the answers yet. We don't. I mean, I think that there's a lot of really beautiful work happening in the world. And so it's like, it's a combination of like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If somebody's already doing something, you can like support that,
Right.
or, in your own path, in your own journey, if there's something that's really important to you, that you bring that forth and really, find a way to shine.
Right.
And
And it's an
uh,
alchemical process, right? That we talk
yeah.
about the ancient alchemists. I mean, they literally tried to turn base metals into gold. This is what they were trying to figure out. And then
Mhm.
it can serve as a metaphor for our spiritual evolution, our spiritual journey. How do we turn our raw materials that are there from trauma, and pain? How do we turn all of that and use it as actual like manure, right? To
Mhm.
grow the garden within our hearts, within our minds, and to actually expand instead of subtract and stay small. So it's an alchemical process going that way. So is this, tell me a little bit about, also before we go, I want you to be able to tell us how you center nature in your work in particular. Like, how is it that you use that with your clients, and tell us a little bit about your work as well. And then I'll let everybody know where they can get a hold of you as well after this.
Absolutely. So, I think it shows up in my work in the way that I see people. So I do a lot of depossession work, and I do a lot of healing. Um, and I'm psychic, I mean, it's like I'm psychic
Right.
and day-to-day psychic stuff, but I think the reason people come to me is because I can kind of move out density for them, with
Mhm.
them, I should say, with them. It is a
Right.
co-creation process. But and the reason that matters is in the same way we talked about how culture has evolved,
Mhm.
there's certain parts of human existence that is not really relevant, or there's certain conditions, certain ideas that's not really relevant to how we operate now.
Right.
And that's on a broader level, but also on a personal level. I work with a lot of people who just they signed up for, and this is no judgment on anyone, because this is what was told would lead them to a happy and successful life. They went to school, they went to college, they got a job, they got married, they had kids, and then they're miserable. This is a lot of people.
This is a lot of
A
people.
lot
This
of
is, yeah,
people.
I mean, I have some of my students are like that, and
Yeah.
my clients too. I mean, it really is, I would say, a pretty vast majority people.
So I have a lot of
Mhm.
people who are like that. I also have another common group of people who are maybe on a similar path, where they're highly creative, highly unique, and doing highly experimental work in the world, and they get targeted like crazy.
Yeah.
So I mean, those are the type of people that I work with. I mean, I work with all kinds of people, but that tends to be the two most common themes.
Right.
And that for me, it's always bringing it back to what that highest potential is. So that's like, I'm a Venus in Capricorn, and in my 10th house, right? So it's like, I always look at people and I'm like, how can we make this the fucking best?
I love
And
that.
so, when in exorcism and depossession work, it's there's all the darkness and all the stuff, the noise that's in the way of whatever that
Mhm.
is.
Right.
And for me, that I my journey with it has been interesting, because I think it's not typical, even compared to other people who do this kind of work, where I can befriend all kinds of energies in a way. Not,
Right.
but essentially it's like, how do we just focus in on that truth and just cut out the
Mm,
noise? And
right.
it's liberation for everything,
Right.
all energies involved, because it's liberation for that truth. It's liberation for whatever has been stuck there, that's been holding that person back. I was like, whatever you are, you get to go do your thing. I don't know. That's not my problem. We're just focusing on this person in front of me.
Right.
And I'm simplifying a really complex process.
Well, I mean,
Obviously.
how can we? It's like we have to be a bit reductionist in talking about this because the nuance and the spectrum is so vast that there is no way to really, bring in all those wild horses and then find a way to succinctly. I mean, we're trying our best to explain it, right? To
Yeah.
help people understand how it can look from outside the abstract and make it into something with a form and explain to people a little bit. But I think people probably experience this, a lot of this, without even knowing that that's what it is. And so to help them develop the language to identify what this phenomena is, I think is also part of the liberation too. You know what I mean? To find a way, what do I put it?
Yeah.
What do I call it?
Right.
It is part of the work.
Right.
Important.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, and that's sort of, as I've gone through this and I've always asked myself what's really real and all this, and it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, I think that there's the gravity and the density of what's holding things in place. And then there's what is trying to move and what is trying to grow and what is the truth.
Right.
And always a tension between the two. And
Yeah.
that's where I just kind of go in and do my thing.
Yes.
And
Right.
I also, I also teach and practice Reiki, which is to me like listen, I've been trained in a lot of things. A lot of people have been trained in a lot of things. What I love about Reiki is like there's really like no rules. It's sort of the closest thing in terms of energy work that I've found,
Yeah. Ah,
because it's just life force. It's just
right.
life force flowing, being with your life
Well, you're
force.
going in with the broom and you're just like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And
kind of
so
like, getting all the dust out so that
yeah,
things could flow. The chi energy can just flow and your will
yeah.
is not blocked. And there's all of that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so to me, it's like eating your vegetables. It's just greasing the wheels. It's making things
Yeah.
happen. So that's been another thing that I do. Teaching that, and I'm teaching intuitive development, teaching tarot. It's all these. They're all paths up the
Right.
same in a way.
They are. And I can attest to your gift because I don't like a lot of there's like, I'm not easily impressed. I'm really not. And but I have been really impressed with and relieved for that you have this gifting because you've helped me understand and affirm my own intuitive hits, my own what I feel like I've been discerning, I'm pretty good at that, but it's rare that I have met somebody else that can affirm that in this language and I feel very comfortable with you. You
Yeah.
really are a very safe place of no judgment, and you really are who you say you are. Which a lot of people, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people will say things, but then they turn out to be something else, right?
Right.
And so you really, really are a safe place. And I'm very happy that you're out here doing that work because we need it so badly, so badly. I think that a lot of misunderstanding around the work that you do and that I do, or anyone else who's sort of in this hidden realm and working with this magic, this energy, and this hermetic, occult, esoteric space, is I think that the subconscious, in general, associates all this with something ancient and in the
Mm-hmm.
past, and even demonic. Very for people with even if the word daemon means not what they think it means.
Right.
There's all of these like layers of not understanding, right, and projection. But they're things that people go through every day, and
Yeah.
and they really could use this work you do and the work I do. And this is where it's at. So and it's growing. People are coming around, and I'm really happy for it, and I'm happy you're out here doing it because like I said, you're the real deal.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think one of the things that I always try to bring is that sort of grace and transformation. Like, it's not pretty, and like we need to just feel okay with that,
Right.
and that's an important ingredient.
It is. One of my students recently said she's going to give me a testimony, a video, and she says, you are truly the red pill for women with the course, because I said,
Mm,
the end of this, you guys have to be ready, and the same with you, and whatever process they go through with you, whatever process they go through with me, it's the end of it. You're not going to see the reality the same again, and you'll never be able to put that back. And
nope.
and so, are you sure you're ready? Which is it's actually a legitimate question. Are you
It is.
sure you're ready?
It is, because most
Mhm.
people really do seek comfort,
Yeah.
and it's not comfortable.
It's not comfortable. Liberation's not comfortable at all. You know, sometimes people come to it when they're on their knees and they just can't take anymore. They're like, and sometimes, you know, it really can affect your life. So people got to be ready for liberation. It's not like, oh, I get to go to the desert now. It's like, well, you know, I get to go hang out in Rome and Italy and Greece, and you can, but you might, you know, be in an existential crisis. You gotta like, you know, you gotta do the work. So yeah, it's real work. Oh my God, this has been so great. I'm so excited that we did this. Was there anything else that you'd like to say? I'm going to actually, for everybody who's interested in your work and how to contact you, I'm going to include here a link to your website, which is oracleofdelphi.com, right?
Oracle
Huh?
of Adelphi.
Adelphi. I don't have my glasses on. You know why? Because you can see these lights in them. So it's like, oh my God. So that now I can see Oracle of Adelphi.
Yes.
.com, which I will have for people to click and have to listen to just me saying it. But anyway, I will make sure people have access to that link, and you can go there and see all of the wonderful services that Alex has to offer. She's truly a magical being, a magical woman. And I can, like I said, when we started, I can't think of anyone else that I'd like to start this with. You know, I just really admire what you're doing. I'm so glad that we're friends. And thank you.
Me too, Griselda. This has just honestly been so beautiful to share with you. And I love that we are bringing our good, juicy conversations to the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We always have really great conversations, and so just like it, I think people would like them. So here we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Mama. Well, thanks everybody for being here. And until the next podcast, nature is the truth and nature is the Messiah. That's what I'm going to say. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for listening to me. If you did. If you didn't, then you're a bimbo. Bimbo.